What was the fly?
הוא רוצה לשלם, אנשים האלה עם כפיים. האמת שבארץ, אם אתה הולך למקומות כאלה, גנאים מחתכים את זה. אני יודע מניסיון, גנאים. כן. הם דואגים שאתה גם תגנן להם.
Can't start.
לא יעלה לנו. לא יודע. אבל אם אתה משלם.
What? The Gemara says that at the time of David HaMelech, there were 100 people dying every day. David HaMelech didn't know what the cause for this was until he asked Hashem, and it was revealed to him from Shemayim that if people would say 100 brachas every day, that would take away this decree. So it tells you how powerful every bracha is, and so it's important to know when you need to say a new bracha. When is the bracha you said finish, and it's time to say a new bracha. So when you go to a wedding, and usually at a wedding there's two parts. There's the part where they serve the meal, and the meal ends, and then some people are invited for just to come for the dancing. Simchas Chasam V'Kala. So if you're invited for the dinner, let's say, and now it's dancing, and by the dancing, usually they put out the desserts, they put out fruit, they put out cake, whatever they put out, kugel, and now you've already washed. So if you eat fruits, so say bracha b'rei pre'etz, it's the dessert. Mezainis, we learned about it a few shiurim ago. No, you were there for the meal, and now they move the tables aside. Now it's time for dancing, and so you're now. You didn't bench. You didn't bench. So wait, let's start again. You're by a wedding. You arrive just for the dance. They move the tables aside just for the dancing. Okay, so if you just arrive then, you say the brachas on what you're going to eat.
Yeah.
However, if you're invited for the meal and you're staying for the dancing, and now they move the tables aside, so halacha is that this is considered a new meal, and not considered part of the original meal. And so if you have a fruit, you have to say a bracha ha'etz, and you have to say brain nefashos. It's not considered all connected to the previous meal. The brachas, you're going to bench afterwards. Not only that, if you bench already and you didn't say brain nefashos, say brain nefashos after benching.
So wait, so it means that when you have a sheva brachot.
Oh no, sheva brachos in a second. I didn't say sheva brachos. I said.
It's not after the.
I'm not saying sheva brachos. I said at a wedding. They move the tables aside. Now there's dancing. So it's considered like a totally new meal.
New meal with new tables.
It's a new meal. You're not sitting in the same place. It's not. They move the tables aside. It's now considered a new thing. And you still are benching. They didn't do sheva brachos yet. Oh, that's what you meant sheva brachos. Right.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Very important point. Sorry. Even though it's still part of the meal, and they didn't do sheva brachos yet, and they're going to do benching. Nevertheless, you have to say a bracha eitz and brain nefashos on the fruits, on the drinks. You wanted to masoda say shahakam and nefashos.
When you say brain nefashos just after you eat the fruit, we have to wait till after you sit at the no, this is something and this is something.
You say brain nefashos after you finish the dessert, and if you didn't, and you benched already, so there are three things which you cannot say a bracha for after, and you still can't say after bracha for afterwards: dates, wine, and mezainis. Really, those things also should say a bracha for, because then it's considered a totally different meal. But since benching includes bread and things which nourish you as well, so it's a question whether the benching already exempted you. But really, you shouldn't wait for benching. You should take the after bracha before on those three items. And on everything. It's a whole whatever you eat then.
It was not included in the first meal.
Right.
Now, if you go back to the buffet table, the other buffet table is still out. It's also considered a new meal.
Once they move the tables aside, and now it's time for dancing, it's considered a new meal.
So what about it says let's bench, basically.
We'll get there.
Hold on. Get up and go have a cake and have the food. It's part of the meal, no?
If they move the table, once they move the tables.
You didn't move the table. You just get up and go have the fruits and have your cake. What is it?
So if you're eating desserts, and they haven't moved the tables aside, it's not considered yet a new meal, and it's the same halacha as having a regular dessert. Or let's go to a regular sheva brachos or regular bar mitzvah. They don't move the tables aside. They just clean the tables. And now they serve the dessert.
Okay.
It's not like that. They're now moving all the tables aside. Now there's dancing. It's just that they clean tables and everyone goes back to the places they ate, and they have dessert and eat dessert in the same place you were
Most
before.
of the time, they don't move the table. They just leave everybody there.
Depends on the mood.
If you're at a very big party and they're not moving the tables and now it's dessert time and you're going back and everyone goes back to the place where they ate, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Regarding that, there's an argument. One opinion is you say no bracha, it's considered a new meal. Another opinion is since they took away the bread and it's considered a new meal, say no bracha, just as if it's by the way when they move the tables, the same thing would apply also if they clean it.
Okay.
However, there's another opinion which says no. Another opinion says that only by a wedding do we say it's like a new bracha, and by a sheva bracha or a mitzvah where there's I don't mean specifically a wedding. I mean only when they move the tables aside for dancing, and now everyone's eating in different places, and you're not anymore at this table you started eating at.
Yeah.
Only then when they move the tables aside, that's when there's a new bracha. But if they don't move the tables aside, it's considered a continuation of the first meal. Okay, so there's an argument. What's the halacha? The halacha is that technically the halacha is that you should say another bracha, but the custom is we don't say another bracha. We don't say another bracha. So therefore, practically,
I'm sorry, break it up a little bit. If you're going and taking a piece of cake,
yeah.
you don't say another bracha, you do say.
If it's by a wedding, you say another bracha. If it's by if they don't move the tables aside, you don't say another bracha.
You don't say another bracha on the Muslims.
Don't say it. I'm sorry.
Let's
Hold on. No, you're right. Very important. Hold on. Slow down. Very good. No, you're right. Let me slow this down. If it's by a wedding and they move the tables aside, you say a bracha rishayna and a bracha achrayna.
Okay.
If it's by a case where they're not moving, if they're not moving the tables aside, you're going to the same place. You say it like every dessert. When you have a meal, you say the first bracha. You don't say the after bracha. Only the bracha rishayna, not the bracha achrayna. And as we discussed, if you sure to go with mazenis, it gets complicated. The mazenis gets complicated whether or not the mazenis is included with the hametzi. Not everything you say mazenis on for dessert.
Okay. So
Because if there's one opinion which says that this mazenis could be hametzi, so then it may have been included in the hametzi already. So mazenis is complicated by every meal. What do you say bracha on it for dessert? Unless it's a pie with a thin crust or it's sponge cake. You can't really say.
You have to say it because you go see brachot, no? That's what I want to say.
Okay, so even though on Shabbos is a rule, you're supposed to add as many brachas as possible, but there are only specific things Shulchan Aruch mentions this rule for. Does not mention this about this. So even on Shabbos, you can, if you have a dessert which is questionable whether, according to one opinion, it's hametzi, you cannot say a bracha on it.
For example.
What you could do is you could just bench first and then say the bracha mazenis and al mechin. You have even more brachas. Now you have two brachas, not just one. You have two because you bench first.
The best on Shabbos is to
Bench first.
And then
Not dessert. That's the best thing to do.
Give an example of a questionable mazenis.
Everything is questionable. Everything except for a pie with a thin crust and sponge cake.
So what is it called? All those other cakes.
All of those cakes are questionable.
The cheesecake with the
Cheesecake is a pie with a very thin crust. That's a cheesecake, not a pie. It's a cake. That's not questionable. That's for sure mazenis. In fact, there's a question if you eat it after you bench, you're gonna have a question because the cheesecake it has for sure mazenis. But the after bracha you can't say an al micha on it or benefashas on it. Why not? Because it has mazenis on it, mazenis becomes the main thing. On the other hand, you're not going to eat a ounce of just flour in the consumption of the size of 3 eggs. 3 eggs are 6 ounces. So that means 1/6 of the cheesecake has to be mazenis in order for you to say al micha, according to one opinion. One opinion, other opinion says that if in 4 minutes you could eat 27 grams of mazenis, it would be good al micha. But if you hold that it goes by the size of the cake, so if it's 1/6 of the cake, which 1/6 of the cake has to be mazenis, or if you say al micha. What do you do if you eat the cheesecake after you benched? So then you have to have 2 other foods. You have to have another cookie to say al micha, another soda to say benefashas. Okay. So
now again, brownies and all those things are questionable.
anything except for a pie with a thin crust or a very thin battered thing. What's a very thin battered thing? A very thin battered thing is a sponge cake. Rabbi Azba even told me a marble cake is a question.
So, okay, so that turns, the question means what?
The question is whether or not this may be hametz.
If you're eating in the middle of the meal, you shouldn't, in theory, make another bracha on the Zayna side.
If you eat it during a meal, you should not make a bracha, right? Because there's a question whether it's included in the hametz, even though the halach is mezeines and al-michya. But since you made a hametz already,
They are doing it in the middle, even though.
Up to today, I also did.
I want to tell you something. I asked Rabbi Zirkin Shalom, Rabbi Shalom is very knowledgeable. Not Shalom. What's his name? Rabbi Zirkin was nice in Parkway. I forgot. And I asked him once what he served cookies during his meal, and I was wondering about it. I asked, how do you do that? He says, these halachas no one's going to ever figure out. I just do what my father did. So his father had cookies during the meal, and that's what he does, and he made mezainis on it during the meal. So whatever. I'm just bringing that out there. Okay. Back to our subject.
No, no, it's about it. We will eat the most. No, see.
Okay. Now, okay. So the pasha, that's his minhag from his father, but practically, halachically, it's not so simple. And the best thing is to make a bracha chayin. There's even an opinion. I'll just mention this opinion just to make things even more complicated. There's even an opinion which says that you're never allowed to say mezainis during a meal, even on the pie with a thin crust, and even on the why. This is Rebbe Levin's opinion. Rebbe Levin says that since if you would be full from mezainis, doesn't matter if there's an opinion which holds it's hametzi or not. If you're going to be full from it, it's considered hametzi. If you're going to be full from it, it's considered hametzi.
Going back to the earlier share that we learned about the pizza.
Right.
The Zayna's pizza.
Right. So if you're going to be, in the earlier show we learned that if you have some mezainis and you eat a bunch of other things, you have to come to Shabbos and Kiddush, you're having crackers, you're eating the whole meal. So since you were satiated also with the crackers turn into hametzi. So since there's such an opinion, it follows then that you ate a whole meal and now you're having some mezainis at the end of the meal, that you're for sure getting full from this mezainis, or you're full already. So therefore, the one opinion would say it doesn't matter whether you ate whether it's dessert or not dessert, it's considered part of the meal in some way, and therefore it should be hamaytzin brachas hamazon, even though it's according to all opinions of mezainis, because it satiated you and you ate it together with the rest of your meal. That's Rebbe Lev's opinion. The other opinion, I actually contacted Rebbe Azba this week. It was really great machayim. I went by him in 770, and he says he totally disagrees. He says that the dessert has no connection to the meal. The altar means if the crackers are the meal, then the crackers come on meitzi, but not the.
But that we mentioned over there.
But not the dessert. Dessert is
going back to what we talked about the pizza.
The dessert is
the meal. We do wash.
The crackers during the meal are considered. If you eat a bunch of things together with the crackers are considered. At least you're satiated, and there's a question of crackers turn into meitzi. But if you're eating it as dessert, so it's not connected to the rest of the meal.
The piece of cake.
Right. It's not connected to the rest of the meal, and therefore, as long as for sure mezainis, doesn't matter if it satiates you or not. I'm just bringing that there is another opinion which says that there's no such thing, even according to Rebbe Levin, ever of saying mezainis as dessert. Just throwing that out there. Okay, moving right along. Now, this is just introduction to get to the subject.
Guys, the rabbi said earlier, he says this is brachas light.
Okay. What's the din, halacha, if you're having a meal and you decide you don't want to eat anymore? You didn't bring the mayim achreinim. You didn't bring mayim achreinim. You didn't bring a cup to benshon. All you did was you decided in yourself, I don't want to eat anymore. Do you need to say to the bracha or not? So the Alter Rebbe says it depends on these two opinions about the Shabbat brachas. Just like with the Shabbat brachas, once they serve the dessert, there's a question or not of whether that's considered like a whole new meal, and therefore there should be a bracha rishayna and a bracha achrayna. According to one opinion, another opinion is that you don't, and the custom is we don't. So two, once you decide not to eat anymore, there are two opinions whether or not you should have to say another bracha, and therefore the Alter Rebbe says best thing is not to continue eating because there's a question whether or not you should say a new bracha now or not. And since there's a question whether you should or shouldn't say no bracha, because it's such a question, you shouldn't better not to eat. But if you decide to eat, since the rule is whenever there's a doubt, you don't say a bracha. If you decide you're going to eat anyways, so then you do not say a bracha. Again, you decide not to eat anymore. You change your mind. You decide to continue eating. When you continue eating, you don't say a bracha. Okay, that's only regarding food. Regarding drink, it's different. How does it work with drink? So understand how it works with food and drink. During a meal, once you decide to finish eating or finish drinking, let's talk about things not during the meal for a second. Let's talk about you decided you have an apple and you decided I'm done, I'm not eating anymore. Once you decide not eating any apples anymore, you have to say another new bracha on the apple. What if you ate the apple and you didn't decide not to eat any more apples? You didn't think anything. You ate the apple and you ate the apple and you didn't make any decisions. But you didn't decide not to eat, you decided you're going to continue eating. You just finish the apple. You have no apples left in front of you. And then you decide, I want to go take another apple from the fridge. So halacha is that even though you didn't specifically have it in mind, but you didn't specifically end either, and therefore the bracha you said on the apple will continue and work on the apple in the fridge. What if instead of having an apple, you want to have an orange? You decided you're done. You didn't decide anything. You finished the apple. You have now an orange in the fridge. And you made a bracha eitz on the apple. You finished all the apples. And now you want to take an orange from the fridge. It wasn't originally part of your plan. You didn't decide to finish eating. But you now took something new. You took it's a fruit, but it's something different. It's not an apple, it's an orange. So then you have to make another bracha on the orange. However, if you still have apples in front of you, so then if you decide to go have an orange, the orange is included with the bracha of 8. You don't need to make another bracha on the orange. So again, briefly, you made a bracha on an apple, and you finish the apples, and you take a new apple from the fridge, no new bracha.
Or you can have in mind whatever you.
The best thing Alter says is, I forgot to mention, very important. Also, the best thing is to have in mind. I'm going to have in mind anything that anything. Oh, I want to include everything and anything in this house and surrounding galaxies. You could do that, but if you don't, most people learn this halacha, like whatever. I don't know, most people I know. I learned this halacha several times, and I don't have in mind every time I make a bracha. You should include everything, whatever. But if you didn't have it in mind, as long as you didn't specifically decide to end your meal, Alter says, if you made a bracha 8 and you finish the apple, you have no apples in front of you. If you take another apple from the fridge, you don't make another bracha. Take an orange from the fridge, and there's no apples in front of you. You make a bracha 8 on the orange. Okay. When you decide that you are finished eating, you didn't do mayim achreinim yet. So the drink that you're going to have is exactly like the new orange. The drink moves up one level. So you are usually by a meal we say that a person is wont to go from one food to another food. You're not specifically ending your meal just because you finished one part of it. You have all this food on the table. You're going to continue. So if you did not have in mind that you're going to specifically end your meal, we say your meal continues. However, if you decide not to eat anymore, so the drink has the same status as the fruit that you had for dessert. Just like the fruit you have for dessert, you make a bracha before it, not a bracha after it. So too, if you decide not to eat anymore, for eating, we said there's a question. For drinking, it's for sure you make a bracha rishona, only shakal, not a bracha achrona for the drink. Okay. Just one more point, and I'll let you guys go. I see it's already. Okay, so when you decide you don't want to eat anymore, regarding drinking, we say you make a new bracha. Regarding food, we say it's a question. Therefore, you don't make another bracha. What if you did mayim achreinim? Or what if you took a cup to do brachas hamazon with? Or what if you decided you're finished eating and you stood up? If you want to do a ma'aseh, want to do an action to end your meal, then it reverts to the situation of the weddings. If not only do you made a decision, but you actually got up, then we look at your action I'm not saying you got up in order to go to the kitchen to get something. So you got up and you went to get my machenim. You get the my machenim, but you're done eating and you went to go get my machenim, or you did my machenim, or you took a cup to do birchas with. In all those situations, your action together with your decision to finish eating causes your meal to completely end, and therefore you have to say now a bracha rishayna and a bracha achrayna on ever you continue to eat. Now, okay, I said the last thing, but the mamish last thing, which is a good example of what we're talking about right now, which is, let's say the host you're eating by decides to continue the meal, and you thought we're done. So once the host, if someone says by the meal, let's bench, so he's more like asking. If he's not the host, he's like asking a question, and therefore his question doesn't end the meal for everybody. If the host says to end the meal and everyone's quiet, and when I say quiet, I mean even your thoughts. You're not thinking, okay, I want to continue. If you like agree, okay, we should end. If you protest, then the meal isn't over. Or even if your thoughts to yourself, I'm going to continue eating. He's going to bench. I'm going to finish eating. Your meal isn't done yet. You can continue eating with the same bracha you said before. You don't have to say another bracha. Because we say that your intent is connected to your host's intent, and therefore, since your host invited you, you're not really finished until your host says
you follow the host.
You follow the host.
Yeah.
If the host continues eating after you decided not to eat anymore, if he actually continues eating, not just he decides to continue, but he actually eats, you could eat with him. That's the words that it says in it. Any questions? All right, stop here.
Go ahead.
Okay.